Hi, I'm here to talk about a really serious subject today. And first, I have to give a trigger warning. I will be talking about sexual abuse, so please keep that in mind if you choose to watch this video. I'm prompted to do this video today by a single Facebook post done by a very brave woman, Julie Salter, 2 months ago. And in that post, she described abuse that she received while being of service in the Sivananda Yoga Vedanta Center. This is the same yoga organization that I belonged to for 20 years and have served and taken many trainings with. After her post, her testimony, many others came forward with other sexual abuse and many other types of abuse. I wanted to come forward with my own story because I feel it's important that people understand who may still be in a similar situation and who may not really see it as clearly as I see my own story now. I have served as a karma yogi volunteer in the ashram in Bahamas, in New York, in Canada, and in Nairdam, India. When I first went to the Bahamas for my teacher training, I was really exhausted the entire time, but I somehow pushed through and wanted to go back as a volunteer. When I went back as a volunteer, I was exhausted the entire time again, and really that was my biggest complaint. So I made an attempt to have an appointment with the director of the ashram, and the protocol at that time was to write a letter explaining why you wanted the appointment and give it to Gopala, who was the assistant at that time to the director. And then you would hear back if you were granted the interview. Some days passed, and every time I would see Gopala, I would ask him if I had the appointment, and he assured me it would be coming. I really wanted to have the appointment before I left the ashram because whether I came back or not was dependent on that interview. So I finally did receive the appointment, and I sat with Swami Sivananda on the lawn where he was taking interviews at that time. And it was really the hardest thing at that time for me to even ask for that interview, to speak up for myself. I'm pretty sure nobody understood that. I wanted to explain to him that I was so tired, but I really enjoyed being there and I wanted to come back. I explained that I had a traumatic brain injury many years before and needed more sleep than I had needed before that. So my request was that 2 or 3 nights a week that I would leave satsang, the evening program, early after the meditation and chanting before the guest speaker or program, so that I could go straight to bed. And that might not seem like a huge request, but for me I was really pulling from a deep place to get that out, to express my needs. He said that if in fact that was true, which I found that to be an odd statement, then he would allow that. So there were times when we had to sleep in the office whenever our name came up again on the schedule or the reception on a mattress, and we would be woken up during the night because people would come in by boat or people would call because we didn't have an answering machine at that time. And that was usually the night that I'm a light sleeper anyway, and it was just challenging sleeping in the office on the floor rather than my tent where I was used to sleeping. And the phone would ring and people would come and need to be checked in, minimally until the morning, and still your sleep was disturbed. That was the most challenging. And of course, in the morning when you were relieved from that post, then you had to go about your regular duties, and you weren't allowed to go to sleep early or anything on those nights either. So that was my main concern, and I was finally given the opportunity to express that, and given my the assurance that if I came back, I would be able to leave satsang early. So why am I telling you this story? I thought really at that time that I was the only one that was that tired, and I came to find out later that everyone was that tired. Everyone was exhausted and told the same thing that I was told, that when I told my immediate superiors, like, I'm really tired, is there any way I could leave early to get a little extra sleep, that I needed to work harder, and that I should let go. I remember hearing that because I was quite familiar with that term. I had learned it in 12-step programs, and so I made a conscious decision. Okay, I'll let go and I'll ride it through to the end of this stint and give it over to spirit, and what I learned from that experience was that spirit had my back all along, but the organization didn't. Spirit was prompting me to speak up for myself, but I find that at that time was very, very challenging for me. But I still believe that it's safe for me to let go, but to spirit, not to a group of people that is trying to get whatever they can from me. So I really want you to see beyond the story what the point is here, that many people are working day and night, year in, year out, without even one day off, and they're told that they just need to work harder in order for this thing to work on them. So that's, I hope you understand the point of that story. So we fast forward to me deciding to go to India at the end of 2001. I had a 8-year-long relationship end at that time, and I really needed to do some soul searching and some healing. So I decided to go to India for 6 months, spend 3 months at the ashram in Nerdam and 3 months traveling. Now, at that time, a lot of people were very concerned for my safety because the 9/11 had happened just the month before, and in my family, fear was always a way to control people, and I was really taught to be fearful of the world, and came to find out, what I really needed to be fearful was my family. But I'll get into that a little later on. So against all of the advice, I went ahead with my plans and went to the ashram. And I was working in the reception and staying in my tent again there. And at some point, one of the more senior teachers asked me, he was cooking for the acharya of that ashram. He was going by Swami Mahadevananda. he was cooking for him, and he had to go on to some other job. So he asked me if I would like to take on that job. And it sounded good. He had two things that he wanted me to know before I took on the job. One was that the Swami did not like Indian food, and we were in an Indian ashram with little access to other food, so I would have to be creative and find different things to serve him. He really liked Italian food, so that was something that I could start out with. And then the second thing was that the Swami would be naked most of the time in his apartment. So I was a little taken back by that, but the gentleman assured me that the Swami was more, higher along in his spiritual journey, and I had heard of other sadhu yogis being naked in the Himalayas, and I had heard of that. So I said, okay, well, I guess because you're being open about it, it must be okay. So I said yes. And even first of all, know that today, if I was offered the same job, I would say no, given all the healing that I've done since then. But at that time, I said yes. And so every day I went to work, and the Swami was naked, and he would sit on the floor in the kitchen while I was preparing food, and cross-legged with everything showing, and I would try to avoid, bring my eyes to a different place. And other people came in and out of the apartment, and there was no hiding it. So I thought, okay, well, I guess this is how it is, I realized today that was not normal. That there was a lot of things going on there that weren't normal. I never felt anything other than that going on personally, but I did remember that one day the Swami said to me, I think you should wear a bra with more support in it. I thought that was also a very odd thing for Swami to say, like, why are you looking at my breasts? But then my mind, because of where I was at that time, and thinking that he was somehow much more realized than I was at that time, I thought, well, it couldn't have been that he was looking at me sexually. He just thought that it was important for me to have nicer clothes or look a certain way. I don't know how I justified it, but looking back, that's a very, very strange thing for a Swami to say to someone that's cooking for them. I never told a lot of people about that, outside of the people who were working there who knew. People were coming and going. There were other weird things going on that I'm not going to talk about because it's not my story. But it all seemed so out in the open and normal that I just thought, like someone who was groomed to be who I was, I just thought, well, it must be me. If I must be the only one who thinks it's weird. So I moved on from there, and continued to serve in the organization in many different places and put on programs. And it wasn't until I saw this post that I spoke of earlier that everything just kind of, time stood still for me, and everything just became so clear about the abuses, sexually and otherwise, the keeping people down, all these people in orange garb were portrayed as people who were like at a higher level, and I see now that that's such a lie, you know. So the thing that I really want you to understand is how a person gets to a place where they're able to, or how this person gets to a place where she's able to be in this position and not have any boundaries, not be able to say no, not be able to say this is not okay, and maybe not even know that this is not okay. So I was first sexually abused as a baby, and I have no conscious recollection of that and would not even know about it on a conscious level, although I know that my body definitely has held a lot of trauma over the years. The family member that abused me actually apologized to me at some point many years ago, over 26 years ago. And that's the first time that I knew about it. I do recall as a very young girl being forced to sit on my grandfather's lap and being held there and not wanting to be there, but was told that I had to stay there. And I believe that this kind of thing led to me receiving a message that was, you're not in control, or you don't have sovereignty over your own body. You can't say no because it won't be heard. And that message manifested many times over the years. So when I was a young teenager, another relative molested me, which I completely do remember that incident. And many years later, I told my mother about it and made her promise not to tell anyone. I just felt so much shame and that it was my fault. And I believe, although my mother died many years ago, I believe that she did keep that promise. And I believe she kept it because she herself was abused by a family member for a long period of time and was blamed for it, was even put into juvenile hall because of it. So her unresolved abuse led her to keep my secret, I believe. And she always told me, when I found out about her abuse, she told me I forgave him. And I believe that she did forgive him as much as someone can forgive when they don't really understand what has happened. And she never really dealt with the trauma. So I believe that this trauma that we experience can be passed down, maybe through the DNA, maybe just through our experiences. I'm not sure. But I do believe that the trauma that I'm healing today is not just my own, but is also my ancestors. So going back to the grandfather that held me in his easy chair and tickled me, much later, he was convicted of child sexual abuse for other members of my family. Two generations of people, many children were abused by him. And he was put onto a registry, a child sex offender registry. He was very old at that time, so no other consequences were there for him. Just if he admitted to it, then he would be put on this registry, and that was it. Meanwhile, 2 generations of a family are still living with the effects of that. So I began using drugs at age 12. I'm not sure of all the reasons. I know that I had terrible anxiety. I continued to use drugs until I was 30 years old. I continued to have a sexual life that was completely a mess until I found transformational breath in 2005 and began to actually heal the trauma. The yoga was helping to a certain extent for me to release a lot of fear and to start to become grounded in myself and to speak up and to express my needs and feelings. But it really wasn't until then that I began to see just how sick I was and why, and start to be able to put up proper boundaries around people and to say no. The codependency, and I believe I have a lot of empathic tendencies, which, may be very similar to codependent tendencies. Maybe they're the same thing. I need to think more on that and know that my perspective is today. What I'm talking about and my perspective on it is from today. And so maybe with more healing, my perspective will change even more, and I will have a broader perspective. I don't know. But for today, with 26 years of healing now under my belt, this is the perspective I have for it. And this is my story, so you can't argue with it. But what I hope is that maybe you'll see some similarity in your story, something that clicks for you. Because I know that I'm not the only one who shows up at an ashram door with stuff and is vulnerable and needing healing, and I feel that there are other people who showed up with maybe similar things to me or in a similar state, and looking for guidance. I was always looking for somebody that was ahead of me to show me a path. And luckily there were teachings in place, and I grabbed a hold of those teachings, and not necessarily the teacher. And those teachings helped me take steps. But when I started to do the breathing, that's when the healing really started to happen. The trauma really started to be integrated. So I tell you this so you understand who is the type of person who says yes to a job cooking for a naked Swami. Why? What led me to that? To understand there's a history. You don't just show up somewhere and say yes to that job unless there's a whole bunch of stuff that happened before that. I see that very clearly now. So how many people are in a situation, perhaps within that same organization, that don't even see that the dysfunction of what's going on around them? I was blinded for a long time to many of the different things that I even knew about, and it was, of course, it was framed in such a way that it would be for our own good, that it was the teachings. And I feel like I need to come out and talk about this now, because I can't believe the original post that I read, that there are people like Julie who put in so many years of service and who were given nothing in return except for the trauma of the abuse. And there are still people in the organization that are being taken care of by the organization financially, and people like Julie have received nothing. And this is where the anger starts to come up in me. This is not right. I have to say something about this. This is absolutely not right. If there is money to be given to take care of people, then the abused should be taken care of. The perpetrators are still being taken care of, and that is not right. And as a collective community, we need to stand together and make it right. Because up until this point, they're not doing the right thing. Even with some pressure being put on at this point, they're still not doing the right thing. And we need to stand together to make sure that that happens. And this is why I'm prompted today to tell this, along with the fact that I'm hoping that at least one person hears it and connects and goes, wow, and the veil is dropped from their eyes. And I completely support the people who are feeling stuck there without the resources, either mental, financial, emotional, whatever, to get out of there. Think about, if you don't understand how someone could get into a position like that, think about someone who's in an abusive relationship and they just can't get out. They've been told and groomed year after year how they can't manage on their own. There's another story that I'll do in another video, and it relates to that, but I'll not get into it here. People don't feel like they can make it on their own. Or maybe financially they've given everything up, and some have even distanced themselves from their families. And that might have been a place of support for them, but that's no longer there. So please have empathy for these folks and try to support them if you can in some way. Lastly, did I take away anything positive from my experiences in the organization? Of course I did. There's no question. But that doesn't make all the other stuff okay, It's like, my grandfather probably did some good things. He served in the war, right? He did some good things in his life, but that doesn't mean that it's okay for him to do what he did. It's not okay. We all have many sides to ourselves, and I feel like sometimes people say, oh, but what about all these good things? That's nice that they did those good things, but look what else they did. We have to hold them accountable. So I hope that you heard something here that can be helpful. I've always wanted to spread love. My intention is to spread love, and positive thinking is very important to me, but that doesn't mean that we can't go in, dig out these wounds that are, and I said this the other day, I feel like it's all pus and it's coming out, and now we have to clean it out. Just like a wound, we have to clean it out, and then only the healing can take place. I feel like in my family, so much was just shoved under the rug, and then let's forget about it, let's pretend it didn't happen, let's forgive, and the pus just kept on festering. So if there's some festering in your life going on, know that it's not going to go away. We have to go in and clean it. And then only the light can shine. So I send blessings and love to you today.